The Florida Gators 2026 recruiting class is almost wrapped up, but they still have some needs on defense.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free movies in the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Tuesday. I'll say this now, and I will say this multiple times throughout this week. If there's any news that happens, not going to be here to cover it. It's Tuesday morning, so getting all 4 wisdom teeth taken out. Going to be a hell of a week after that, I'll tell you that. Not going to be able to really speak, but until then, which by the way, we will still have normal show every single day. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. And the Florida Gators, their recruiting class is mostly filled out. You know, they're at 18 kids now, which is kind of insane to think about when you go, all right, well, they had 1 at the start of June, but now they're at 18, which is kind of crazy. A lot of the offensive positions are filled out, you know. They'll probably add another receiver or running back, tight end maybe, but for the most part, +1s on offense. Defense is where they need to be filled out, though, and the most important position for me here is defensive line edge. And a lot of targets have committed here, but it ain't over till they sign, right? And Florida does have their commits in edge rusher KJ Ford at Duncanville, which was a big addition. He was a huge name target that committed a couple weeks ago. Defensive lineman Kendall Gervil, who is, I think, a little bit overlooked right now. I mean, he has an insane level of power. Just that, like, he's the kind of guy where go watch Kendall Gervil, and when you talk about him, you just go, that's raw power. And I love it. And again, power is not strength. Power is different. Power's got explosiveness in there. And Kendall Gervil fits that. Then there's also defensive lineman and edge Jarayla McCoy. I know that on recruiting sites, he's listed as a defensive lineman. We've heard that Florida's recruiting him for the edge. I view him as someone who is kind of going to play both. Maybe like a long-term Tyreek Sapp type situation. He could be like just a big jack when it's all said and done, but he's also someone that I don't think is really done developing. And so like physically developing. Obviously, none of these guys are. So people could change depending on how much weight they put on or lose or anything like that. But right now, like the 3 guys they have committed, fans of them. I like all 3 of the guys that they have committed right now. My issue isn't the quality of the players, it's the quantity of the players, because you're going to need more than 3 defensive line commits, especially considering that you're at risk of losing quite a few guys this year. And so for me, it's more so that you're at risk of losing quite a few guys. You've got guys that are coming in from previous classes that are stepping into their upperclassmen roles. But the way that this roster is kind of shaped up to be right now, with their, we're going to recruit you and then we'll spend a few years developing you, is that you're going to have cycles upcoming where every year you're losing 2 or 3 starters on the defensive line. You're not going to have multiple multi-year guys there. And so that's why I'm like, you got to add more quantity, just because you're going to be losing bodies. And so you bring in these guys that can be depth eventually. And Florida's been in on it with a lot of guys. Haven't landed them right now. And it's not to say that they can't land them. Edge rusher Trenton Henderson is committed to LSU. And reports started coming out a little while before he committed to LSU that, hey, he's deciding between LSU, Florida, and it became an NIL thing that Florida simply wasn't willing to match on. Sure, right? That's just a situation where you just kind of deal with it, right? Things can change later in the cycle, but for the time being, he's an LSU Tiger. And look, like Florida could go out there and win a bunch of games and boosters start throwing money, and you can go, all right, well, we're going to retain our talent. And once we're done with that, we're going to go add an edge rusher. And it's going to be a high school edge rusher like Trenton Henderson. Edge rusher Jay Cruel isn't committed anywhere right now, but his recruitment's been really interesting. Florida felt, and I mean, from the public perspective, Florida felt like the favorite there. And then the top three came out and Florida wasn't in it at all. And an interesting situation, but for now, Florida's not in his top three. We'll see what happens and what shapes up. But for now, Florida's not in there. Defensive lineman Valdon Sone recently committed to Georgia. But based on how his recruitment went and how it was kind of just a whirlwind at times, I'm not going to count him as committed until he signs. This one was full of secret, unofficial visits and all that stuff. And it's like, when I see a recruitment like that, where it feels like, I mean this in a positive way, I guess, or not even positive way, but I don't mean it in a negative way. It felt mercenary-ish, which honestly, I don't mind the mercenary stuff. I get it when people talk about it, but like, if you go and you grab a defensive lineman, you're like, hey, well, you know what? I need a 1-year killer. Go get him. Like that's stuff that is going to happen. I don't think every position can be a mercenary type. I do think you could do that on the defensive line. So Valdon Sone, wouldn't count him committed till he signed, just based on how it felt. It felt very business-like. Defensive lineman Vodney Cleveland is committed to Texas, but wouldn't count him as committed until he signs as well. Like, none of these guys should be counted as committed until they sign, especially when we've heard reports from every major publication, every major recruiting service about how much money is being thrown at defensive linemen this year. Why should I believe that you just took that first contract that you signed and you just call it a day? Because I don't believe it. Defensive lineman James Johnson was committed to Georgia, 4 weeks ago, a little bit less than 4 weeks ago. Flipped to Texas last week, and he's openly said, hey, my recruitment is open until December. Keep recruiting him, but you don't need to care about the commitment until December. Like, he's said it. Had he committed to Florida last week, like many people thought might happen, it's still, like, it would have been awesome to get him, and it would have been fun to land him, but we still would have been looking at this going, all right, well, he said his commitment's open until December, so it's open till December. Defensive lineman Preston Carey committed to Georgia. Florida was reportedly offering more money, and Georgia's been his number one. I do think that this is one of the very few cases where you could say, hey, he's probably signing with the spot that he's at. Another case like that, defensive lineman Jameer Perez, JJ Perez, he was committed to Florida, but flipped to Ohio State. He is an Ohio kid, and kids don't often leave Ohio. If they're from Ohio and Ohio State wants you, it's kind of rare that they leave Ohio. So JJ Perez committed to Ohio State, probably going to stay that way if I had to guess. Defensive lineman Tyson Bacon had Florida on his list, and I will say this, had Florida on his list. I don't know if he was even a take for the Gators at the time of his commitment, but he's currently committed to Miami, and things can always change, and the door can always stay open. So I will say that, again, a lot of kids committed elsewhere. Billy Napier has made it a habit of flipping kids late in the year. Wouldn't shock me. In fact, I'd be shocked if it doesn't happen at some point with some of these kids. Probably, or maybe not this specific list, but probably a kid or two that are either committed elsewhere or not committed somewhere. Still going to add to this defensive line class. We're going to talk about the other spot, or one of the other spots on the defense if Florida needs to continue recruiting when we get back with Locked On Gators. You ever at just the last minute decide to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize, you know what? Yeah, I want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, invite a bigger group to come with you. Game time makes it all possible. One thing that I like to do is, especially on a day where, I'm like, oh, I want to go watch the Mets. Citi Field's not far from me at all. Outdoor stadium. I'll check the weather the day of. I need two things when I go to a baseball game. I need at least a sunny day. It doesn't need to be super warm, but at least a sunny day and a good pitching battle. I want to see good pitchers. I do. That's a fun part for me. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, wherever it's the podcast and on YouTube. And the next spot we're talking about is linebacker. We're basically moving back, right? And linebacker, Florida does have a linebacker committed in Malik Morris, committed out of Lakeland a couple weeks ago, or a week and a half ago. Hell of a player, right? And Malik Morris is someone that, Florida Gators fans have heard about and spoken about for a while now. And for a while, it felt like Florida was in the lead, especially late there, right? Like, this is a kid who it hit June and OVs started happening, and he went on his OV to Florida, and then he canceled an OV to Missouri so he can take an unofficial to Florida. And it kind of just felt like we were sitting there because this was before he had given a date. Like for a long while, Malik Morris was just a recruit without a commitment date. And then we were told, oh, hey, probably June or July. And then I was like, all right, well, probably July, but could be moved up. And it kind of just felt like every time there was progress made with Florida and Malik Morris, we got more information about a commitment date. He took his official to Florida, and it was like, oh, well, you know what? It used to be thought of as like just generally summer. Now it's late June, early July-ish is gonna be when he commits. And then he takes his unofficial the next week to Florida again. And it's like, oh, well, we think he's going to commit on July 4th. He ended up committing on like July 7th or something like that. But every time Florida and Malik Morris interacted publicly, felt like we got a little bit closer to a commitment date, at least being revealed, right? So Malik Morris commits, and he committed on a Monday. That Friday, or that Saturday, there was supposed to be another commitment. It was a Saturday. There was supposed to be another commitment. Linebacker DQ4 from IMG was supposed to commit, but in the days leading up to his commitment, reports started surfacing about, hey, Michigan is really making a late push here, right? And I said on the show, I think that if he holds true to the commitment date, I still think he'll pick Florida. But I do think Michigan's still pushing, right? Because, how many times have we seen high school kids, especially this cycle, commit early, cancel visits, and then reschedule visits and flip and change that? So it was like, all right, well, I feel like he would still commit to Florida, but that there'd still be a decent chance of Michigan still recruiting him and him potentially flipping to Michigan there. But instead, he just pushed back the recruitment. At the time of recording this, hasn't announced a date for the recruitment or for the commitment. But it still feels like it's going to be Florida or Michigan at this point. Other schools can get involved, I'm sure, but at least for the time being, it still feels like Florida or Michigan. And honestly, I think regardless of what happens with any other linebacker recruit, Florida's going to stay in on this. And the reason that I say any other linebacker recruit is because there's one more guy that we are going to talk about today. Actually, there's two. One we'll get out the way right now. Karan Mayrock with Florida State. Not expecting him to be a Florida target. You got Malik Morris. You're probably going to get at least one of your other linebacker targets, and then I think you're kind of done pursuing them. Maybe a late flip candidate, but for the most part, I think that one's over. But the last name to talk about is Isaiah Williams, right? linebacker that is on his 5th commitment. It was, I think, what was it? Florida State, Louisville, Syracuse, Florida, Ole Miss, I think was the order. And he was once committed to Florida, flipped to Ole Miss after taking a visit there. And for a while, it got a bit quiet after that. But there is still legitimate traction that he just might flip back to Florida. And I know that, he took the OV and that there's been constant communication between both sides here. And Isaiah Williams, I think a lot of people are kind of looking at him going, all right, well, he could flip at any time, right? If he flips to Florida, he could still flip somewhere else at any time. And so this might be similar to the James Johnson situation where we look at the recruitment and we go, all right, well, he's probably going to keep this recruitment open until December, right? So maybe we don't push too much for a recruitment there. Maybe. But or for the commitment there, and we're fine, waiting it out. And the longer this takes, the later the flip, the less likely chance of another flip. But Steve Wilfong also reported like 2 days ago or something that Isaiah Williams might be visiting Texas in the fall. Because why would they don't have enough commits for this class, right? Texas and Georgia are each taking 130 commits in this cycle. I don't know what the hell they're doing. But that's it. They're just adding. I was smacked my microphone. They're just adding everybody. Isaiah Williams is a target for them. I still think that Florida should be, if he's a guy that you think can come in and contribute and fits, then do it. I know there's a ton of Florida Gators fans that look at Isaiah Williams and are like, oh, the 5 commits, I wouldn't want to go anywhere else, or I wouldn't want to take him because he's going to flip somewhere and this and that. And if you take him, he's just going to hit the portal and all that stuff. Here's what it comes down to. The staff is still recruiting him. There is still mutual interest. I don't care to sit here and waste my time complaining about an addition like that when I do think he's a very talented football player. And if they think that character-wise he could still fit, then that's what they think. Yeah, he's got 5 commitments. He's a kid. Earlier on in the cycle, maybe it was just him going, hey, you know what? The place I'm at is where I'm going to flip to, whatever. I don't know. Maybe it's just him committing wherever he felt like committing. But right now, they're still pursuing him. And to me, that still says that he would be a take. Because we've seen them cut off kids before, right? So I would still think that, hey, that's still a spot that they're genuinely pursuing and genuinely considering there. We've got one more spot to talk about today when we get back with Locked On Gators. You ever wish managing your money just felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and all of your spending in one place. So, in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year with monarchmoney.com. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And to wrap up today's show, we are talking about the safety spot, which, look, Florida right now has a pretty solid safety room, right? It's a really young room and there's some unproven parts, but in terms of looking at how you want to build out a room, they're pretty decent there right now. They also, for the 2026 class, have one commit there in Kaden Hall. And Kaden Hall was one of the first commits in the heater that started early in June. Just don't forget, this was a class like we always talk about Florida having one commit at the start of June. This isn't a class that didn't have any commits. Like, this isn't a class that just had one commit the whole time. Will Griffin committed to Florida on June 1st, 2024. On June 1st, 2025, he was the only commit in the class. That is not because Florida didn't land a commit for an entire year. No, it is because Florida landed some commits, and those kids didn't stick. Isaiah Williams committed to Florida, flipped to Ole Miss. Jalen Waters committed to Florida, flipped to Miami. Devin Jackson committed to Florida, decommitted for a long while, and we'll talk about him in a minute. But this is a class that had commits and then lost them. And then they went on a heater to start June. And Kaden Hall was a part of that. A quick trigger safety that has good instincts in coverage. He does, again, this is a thing that we talked about on the scouting report episode for him. Good instincts in coverage where he's in zone, he's in between two receivers. His eyes are constantly on the quarterback while he's constantly making sure that he's in a good spot. Ball goes up, he gets to the ball. Good instincts in coverage. Good measurables too. 6'2", 6'3", depending on where you look. Like a pretty damn solid athlete. Again, just fires down, which I do think is one of my favorite things about watching a safety, when you just see him, ball goes out wide, and you just watch him fly down. Whether it's, a screen or a drag or whatever it may be, but ball goes, we'll say, underneath and wide. It could be a toss, I don't care. But ball goes underneath and wide, and you just see a safety come firing downhill. Like, I love watching that from a safety. Even like a guy that's supposed to be more of a rangy over the top, just come down, fire down, and crack someone. Kaden Hall does that, and I love it. The name that I think most Florida Gators fans know at this point in the safety room as a target is Bralan Womack, right? Bralan Womack was a name that popped up immediately early in 2025 when Florida hired Vinny Sunseri. I think that same day, reports started coming out that, hey, Vinny Sunseri has a great relationship that will put Florida in the mix for Bralan Womack. Since then, that hype about the relationship and recruitment has died down. Since then, the hype around Bralan Womack and his recruitment has gone up. And I think that right now, Bralan Womack, who is set to commit in August, is most likely going to commit to Ohio State. Couple things about that, though. One, where a kid initially commits does not mean that's where the kid is going to wind up. We've seen that at least 1,000 times over the past couple of years. Where a kid initially commits does not mean that that's where they're staying. He's committing less than a month from today. It's August 22nd when this is coming out, or it's July 22nd when this is coming out. He's committing on August 21st. That means that, again, while wherever he commits initially doesn't mean it's definitively where he's going to wind up. It also does mean that there is a month from now until his commitment date for any school to really make traction or make a move. Right now, Ohio State is viewed as the public favorite for good reason, right? Safety's had success there. They got Caleb Downs there right now. They can pay if that's a big part of it, which I would imagine it is, right? If I was an incredibly talented defensive back, I'd be at least considering where the money's coming from and where it's coming to. But Florida is still in there. Auburn is still in there. And I know that there's people that talk about Texas A&M still being in there. I will say I haven't really – I don't know. I feel like we haven't heard much legitimate traction with Texas A&M. So we'll see there. But I do think that Florida and Auburn are very much in it with Ohio State. Again, Ohio State is the favorite. Ohio State is the most likely spot. Doesn't mean it's where he's winding up. And again, wherever he commits initially doesn't mean that's where he's signing when it comes time for early signing day. Devin Jackson, who we spoke about before, was committed to Florida, decommitted, and for a bit felt like Florida might be back in it. He took a visit to Florida, an unofficial visit to Florida on like a random Tuesday. But he recently committed to Oregon. So he's committed to Oregon right now. I don't know what it is about Devin Jackson's recruitment. I don't know Devin Jackson. I don't even know if I know someone that knows Devin Jackson outside of maybe Brian Smith. But even then, I haven't spoken with Brian about it, but something about this just tells me like Devin Jackson might be one of those players where if Florida produces on the field, defense looks good, Billy Napier definitively back for another year. Because here's the thing, I don't think there's another skin of your teeth season right now for Florida or for Billy. I think that this is a year where Billy's either getting fired or earning himself at least another year or two, and probably even a contract extension. I feel like this isn't a year where Billy's going to make it by the skin of his teeth. If you make the college football playoff, you're probably not getting fired next year unless everything crumbles. And so you're probably getting an extension. If you win 7 games, first off, like that's not a good season with this roster. Okay. I get this. That's really a bad season with this roster. And so I do think that you get an answer of like, all right, well, probably not going to be here long, right? If you can't win with this roster, you probably can't win. Now, I'm not saying championship. I'm saying, make the college football playoff. That should be the expectation. That should be what everybody expects from this team. So I do think that this might be a situation where, hey, you win, you impress on the field, I'm right back in it. I really am, because that'll solidify your tenure here. But for now, I'm going to be locked in with Oregon, locked in my spot with that class, NIL, cool uniforms, all that stuff. I'm going to be locked in with Oregon. Last player is Jaden Broadnax, who I look at him as just a defensive back. I think he could play the slot. I think he can play safety. I think you can probably try him at corner, although I wouldn't, but I do think it's a spot that you can try him at. He was supposed to take an official visit, but canceled it kind of at the last minute. And Louisville convinced him to cancel it, right? Which I don't think it's a secret. Like, I don't think that's me, spilling secret sauce or anything. It's just, hey, school that kid is committed to, convince him to cancel an official visit. Who'd have thought? I do think, though, that if Florida can get him on campus in the fall, you've still got a very realistic shot. So Florida's got one safety. You're probably going to take 2. But right now, like I think that there's 2 guys, really, Devin Jackson and Jaden Broadnax, I think, are more likely. But you're really in it for 3 targets. Haven't really missed on safety targets either. But right now, you're in it for 3. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free. You're missing the podcast and on YouTube. We will be back tomorrow to talk more Florida Gators football. Tomorrow we'll be back with Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss. We're going to give an early preview to that game, talk a little bit about last year's game, have some fun with it. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I'll see you all next time.